Hello everyone, the release of Natlan is finally upon us, and Kinich is one of the 3 newest characters releasing in patch 5.0. Unlike Malani, Kinich had a relatively quiet beta cycle, only receiving some slight buffs along the way. As a result, he's looking to be a very unique and solid Dendro carry that will likely get even better as more Natlan characters are released. Although Kinich will be releasing on the second half of patch 5.0, being prepared for his release early is a good thing. So I wanted to sum up all of the updated information you need to know about Kinich into one final guide. I will be explaining how Kinich works, the best ways to build him, his potential best teams, and analyzing his place in the meta in terms of overall strength and pull value. Pretty much everything you need to know with simple and practical explanations while also giving more detailed analysis that is backed by TC. Before we dive into Kinich's kit, I think it's important to understand the special mechanic that will be present in all Natlan characters, Nightsoul. All of the releasing Natlan characters and some equipment like artifact sets will play around the Nightsoul mechanic whether in or out of combat, so I will explain the most important parts of Nightsoul that you need to know going into 5.0. Nightsoul has 3 main features. First, Nightsoul's Blessing. This is the primary effect of Nightsoul where the characters enter a special enhanced state, typically by using their elemental skill to access their main kits. While in the enhanced state, the Natlan characters gain a special Nightsoul gauge where they can either accumulate and spend Nightsoul points for extra damage, or just extend the duration of their enhanced state, which depends on the character. What Nightsoul's Blessing exactly does will be unique for each Natlan character. Second is Nightsoul Burst. All this does is when you have Natlan characters on your team, whenever a character does elemental damage, this effect will trigger. The more Natlan characters you have on your team, the shorter the trigger interval. The cooldown is shared party-wide, and currently with 1 Natlan character, the cooldown is 18 seconds, with 2, the cooldown is 12 seconds, and with 3 or more, the cooldown is 9 seconds. Proccing this effect will typically give some sort of damage buff to the Natlan characters, which is specified in one of their passive talents. The third feature is Nightsoul Transmission. This is an exploration feature. The Nightsoul enhanced states for each Natlan character can be used in the overworld for faster traveling. While exploring specific areas of Natlan, Nightsoul Transmission can trigger, allowing you to stay in the enhanced state longer, and can unlock special exploration movement abilities specific to each character. With a proper understanding of Nightsoul, let's go into Kinich's kit. Kinich is a 5-star Dendro Claymore user that ascends with crit damage. Like the other Natlan characters, his gameplay involves a lot of mobility both in and out of combat. However, what makes Kinich unique as an on-field Dendro main DPS is that he is designed around the burning and Burgeon reactions, making him the second Dendro character released in Genshin that directly synergizes with Pyro. Let's go into his abilities. Here are the numbers on his normal talent. The one interesting thing about his normals is that Kinich can perform 1 mid-air normal attack after launching himself in the air with a skill, but other than that, you can ignore this as Kinich primarily deals elemental skill damage. Kinich's elemental skill makes up the majority of his kit. Out of combat, his skill is a grappling hook with a reduced cooldown so you can swing around. You can hold down the skill to aim it. If there is an enemy nearby, his grappling hook will target and attach to the enemy instead, making Kinich enter Nightsoul's Blessing for 10 seconds. While in Nightsoul's Blessing, Kinich generates 2 Nightsoul points every second and can swing around the enemy. While circling the enemy, Kinich can use a normal attack to deal Dendro damage to the enemy twice with his loop shot and gain 3 Nightsoul points. Once Kinich has 20 Nightsoul points, which is the maximum amount he can hold, Kinich can use his elemental skill again to fire Scale Spiker Cannon to deal a massive amount of damage. Afterwards, he'll continue circling the enemy. Thus, the entire gameplay for Kinich after latching onto the enemy with his skill is normal attack until the green bar next to him fills up, press skill to launch a big attack, then repeat until Nightsoul's Blessing is over. In addition, each time Kinich enters Nightsoul's Blessing with his skill, it will generate a total of 5 particles. There are 3 other parts of Kinich's kit that enhance his elemental skill. First, after Kinich fires his Scale Spiker Cannon, he creates a field called a Dead Zone. When Kinich enters it while swinging, he gets 4 Nightsoul points. Second, Kinich's A4 passive increases the damage of Scale Spiker Cannon after the party triggers Nightsoul Burst. Because Kinich's cannon shots have a high attack multiplier, this passive is pretty nice. However, in 5.0, Kinich won't have other Natlan characters available on his teams, resulting in a high Nightsoul Burst trigger interval. As a result, you will only get 1 stack of this buff per rotation until future Natlan characters are released that synergize with Kinich. Lastly, and most importantly, Kinich's A1 passive. When an enemy is hit by any attack of Kinich's elemental skill, they will enter the Desolation state. While in this state, when the enemy takes burning or Burgeon damage, Kinich receives 7 Nightsoul points. This is a huge source of Nightsoul points, and getting Nightsoul points is important so that Kinich can fire his cannon shot skill as many times as he can while he's in Nightsoul's Blessing. This is the reason that Kinich is a burning and Burgeon oriented main DPS. Next, Kinich's elemental burst, which is pretty simple. Kinich summons a jaw to rain fire onto his enemies. It just does damage, and it works similarly to Navia's burst, so you can switch out and it will continually deal AoE Dendro damage. Additionally, if you use Kinich's burst while he's in Nightsoul's Blessing, the enhanced state gets extended by 1.7 seconds. This extension allows you to use Kenich's burst after using his skill without having the burst animation time take away from the 10-second duration of Nightsoul's blessing. Lastly, like the other natlan characters, his last two special passives are purely exploration based. In summary, while exploring certain areas of natlan, Kinich can trigger Nightsoul transmission to grapple more in the overworld. In addition, he can mark natlan resources on your map and gains increased movement speed when collecting them. Talent priority is simple skill over burst. His general gameplay within a team is relatively straightforward. First, you set up your support skills, then switch to Kinich and use his elemental skill to enter Nightsoul's blessing. You can burst here if you have it. Then you circle around the enemy with the grappling hook, normal attacking and pressing skill again once the gauge is full until his enhanced state is over. As long as you can proc Kenich's A1 consistently with burning or Burgeon, Kinich should be able to use 2 normal attacks into a skill a total of 4 times per rotation. Afterwards, you loop back to your supports and can repeat the process again. Let's cover Kenich's Constellations. C1 gives his cannon shot 100% crit damage, so a pretty big damage increase. It also gives Kinich increased movement speed after he lands from using his grappling hook, so nice exploration buff. C2 allows Kinich to shred Dendro resistance when his attacks during his elemental skill hits enemies. In addition, the first cannon shot he fires deals more damage and has larger AoE. The Dendro res shred makes C2 pretty strong, especially if Kinich is paired with another Dendro DPS like Emily. C3 increases Kenich's skill talent level by 3, C4 gives extra energy whenever Kinich attacks during Nightsoul's blessing every 2.8 seconds, while also increasing the damage of his elemental burst. C5 increases Kenich's burst talent level by 3, and lastly, C6 gives Kenich's cannon shots an additional attack to bounce between enemies, dealing even more damage. These additional attacks also gain the buffs of Kenich's C2 and A4 passive. It's pretty much just a huge increase of damage. Here are some pre-release calculations of the relative damage increases gained by each constellation done by theory crafter Hyperwebster. In summary, C6 is Kenich's highest damage increase, which is kind of obvious, but C2 and C1 are also nice damage boosts for those wanting to vertically invest in Kinich. Kinich also has several strong weapon options. His signature will be his best in slot, crit rate substat, and the highest base attack from a weapon we've seen so far, which is great for Kinich as an attack scaler. Its special passive pretty much just gives 60% damage bonus to Kenich's skill and burst as long as he maintains stacks from attacking with his skill or his party members triggering burning or Burgeon. Other 5-star weapons that just give damage stats like attack and crit are fine choices. The two best 5-star alternatives are Beacon and Verdict. For 4-star weapons, as always, Serpent Spine is the best for damage-focused Claymore users. For free-to-play options, the best weapon will be the new natlan craftable Claymore. Gives a good amount of attack on the substat and elemental skill damage bonus from the passive, which is great for Kinich as long as the party triggers a pyro-related reaction. And from the web event, you'll be getting a copy of it for free, so you don't have to worry about getting the new natlan billets. Here is a more complete weapon ranking done by theory crafter Hyperwebster if you're interested to see how good the weapons I mentioned are, or the placement of other weapons that I didn't specifically mention. For artifact sets, you can start off with 4-piece Unfinished Reverie and 4-piece Golden Troop. However, since Kinich is a natlan main DPS, you will want to switch over to 4-piece Obsidian Codex ASAP. It pretty much just gives Kinich 15 damage percent and 40 crit rate, although Kinich will only get the crit rate after his first scale Spiker Cannon shot. Kinich is a regular attack scaling carry, so the artifact stats that you should be aiming for are the typical Attack Hourglass, Dendro Goblet, Crit Circlet. For substats, prioritize crit, then attack percent, then ER. Kenich's burst is nice to use, however, his skill makes up the majority of his damage, thus it is not worth specifically building enough ER to burst every rotation. While ER is a nice substat to have, you don't have to worry about it and should just focus on the damage stats. Finally, let's go over Kenich's best team options. Due to the importance of his A1 passive, Kenich's primary and best team comps will play around Burning or Burgeon, and as an attack scaler, he will really appreciate Bennett in his teams. A standard and solid Burning team will include Kinich, Emily, an off-field pyro applicator like Toma, Dea, or Shangling, then Bennett. Either Emily or your off-field pyro should hold Deepwood to buff Kinich. Pretty straightforward Burning comp, and they're looking to be some of the strongest and most consistent Kinich teams. One interesting choice you can do, however, is instead of having one of the off-field pyro applicators, you can potentially run Kazuha or Venti with Deepwood and pyro infuse their burst as a source of pyro. Definitely a bit more of a meme team than the standard, but it could be fun to try. If you don't have Emily, then you can substitute her for another Dendro unit like Nahida. However, while these teams can function, these burning teams will be significantly worse as Nahida's EM buff doesn't do much for these teams. Thus, it's going to be better to switch off double Dendro and pure burning. One alternative is slotting an off-field cryo sub DPS like Rosaria and utilize the burning aura to melt her attacks. However, these teams are greatly limited by current cryo choices. The better and more common alternative will be slotting in a Hydro unit for Burgeon. Any off-field Hydro unit like Yelan, Farina, or Shengqiu will be a good choice here. Another Burgeon team option is using including Farina, Baizhu, and Shengling. However, this team can't fit in Bennett, so Kenich's damage will take a hit. You can also go a Burning Overload team, which is a decent option for Kinich, where you replace the off-field Pyro for Fischl. These teams will have less burning uptime, however, resulting in Kinich getting 2 less cannon shots than normal, which does hurt his damage. Thus, you'll be relying more on Fischl's damage instead. If you really dislike burning or Burgeon-oriented team comps, then you do have the option of playing Kinich in a standard Quick Bloom team or a Nilou Bloom team. They definitely won't be as good as some of Kenich's other top team options, but they will likely be strong enough. Hyper Bloom and Nilou Bloom teams just do a good amount of damage even if you don't utilize Kenich's entire kit and mainly use him to apply Dendro. To conclude this Kinich guide, I wanted to share my analysis on his place in the meta in terms of overall strength and pull value. Kinich is looking to be another solid 5-star main DPS releasing the Genshin Impact. To visualize his potential strength, as with the other calcs I shared about Kenich's constellations, weapons, and artifacts, here are some team damage calculations done by theory crafter Hyperwebster, who closely followed Kinich throughout his beta. Big shout out to him and his work. His Discord info is in the description. As always, keep in mind that these are pre-release calculations, so they are subject to change after in-game testing. The calcs include many different team comps with theoretical optimized rotations for each team, so feel free to pause if you want to take a closer look. To me, the main takeaway from these calcs is that a good number of Kenich's teams deal good damage. The exact numbers depend on a lot of factors like rotation time, but there are some teams that are around 60k DPS, which is good enough, while some are over 70k DPS, which to me indicates that Kinich is a top tier DPS. As a 5-star Dendro main DPS, his closest comparisons are Alhaitham and Tighnari, both of which are solid carries. I could argue that Kinich is as good or even better than Alhaitham, but because Kinich plays in Burning and Burgeon teams while the other two are spread and Hyperbloom centric, they feel completely different team comp niches, so it's kind of not fitting to compare them. Overall, Kinich is just a solid DPS character in the Burning and Burgeon niches. The biggest issue with Kinich in 5.0 is that he's missing a natlan support that can pair well with him. His current best teams don't have any other natlan characters, thus his A4 passive can only be procced once. In addition, no teammate at the moment can give him the full 40% damage buff from 4-piece scroll. Because his teams are lacking in buffs, Kinich is quite Bennett reliant and there is a lot of room for his teams to improve. The biggest expectation is that Malvika, the Pyro Archon, will significantly improve Kenich's teams. If she is able to provide off-field Pyro application and buff at the same time, a lot if not all of Kenich's current team weaknesses may be alleviated. But although Kinich is likely to get better in the future, he's still a very strong DPS character on release, so if you're looking for a solid and unique Dendro carry, he'll be a nice addition to your roster. That's everything I wanted to cover about Kinich. I hope this guide and analysis was helpful to y'all in giving you a better understanding of everything related to Kinich. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video and want to see more guides like this on future characters. Also, I have a small Discord server, so if you just want to discuss about Genshin, ask any questions, or just chill, feel free to join. For all of you planning on wishing, I wish you all the best of luck on your Kinich pulls.